Hey guys, tonight we journey back, way back, to one of the worst times in all of human history to be born. Picture this. It's 10 Uzurn BCE, and you've just emerged into the world, slippery and screaming, under a grass hut with zero insulation and a strong chance that your first diaper is just dry moss. The air reeks of dung smoke. Your mum? She's 14. Your dad? Probably already died from an infected cut or a rival tribe's raid. You're alive, but for how long? You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this sleepy history crew reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're born into a nomadic or just barely settled tribe somewhere near the Fertile Crescent. Which sounds romantic, until you realise fertile mostly refers to how fast parasites can reproduce in your intestines. You live in a world where the most advanced medical treatment is a clay pot filled with boiled weeds and a chant from someone named Wormkeeper. You're not walking yet, but you've already been exposed to malaria, hookworm, and possibly leprosy. Food? If you're lucky, it's a handful of barley gruel and a tiny dried fish. If you're not lucky, it's nothing. The tribe's been following a herd of gazelle for 2 days and you're crying too loudly. Someone might suggest letting the spirits decide your fate. That's old world code for leaving you under a bush. Famine's always lurking. The shift from hunting to farming seems like progress, but early agriculture is a cruel trick. You're trading a varied, foraged diet for a monotonous one that wrecks your teeth and stunts your growth. The first farmers are shorter, sicker, and more stressed than the foragers before them. Historians still argue whether agriculture was a step forward or a desperate last resort. Oh, and disease? Congratulations, your village just invented the cesspit. Your neighbours dump their waste a few feet from the cooking fire. You don't know what germs are, but they know what you are. You share everything. Lice, dysentery, and probably a giant roundworm the size of a shoelace. There are no antibiotics, no soap, no band-aids. That scrape you got climbing over a sharp rock? Yeah, it's infected. By age 5, half your childhood friends are dead. If you live to 30, you're considered ancient. One cool fringe fact. Some archaeologists think ancient folks used crocodile dung as sunscreen. That's right, literal poop on your face to avoid sunburn. Stylish and smelly. When the tribe isn't dealing with hunger or parasites, you're busy not getting eaten. Saber-toothed cats are mostly extinct, but wolves, bears, and other humans are not. Some wandering groups raid others not for land, but for people. You're a small, underfed child. That makes you prime real estate for forced labour. Or worse, you sleep on dirt. You wear itchy animal hides. Your toys are rocks. If you're a girl, you're probably married by 12. If you're a boy, you'll be given a spear and told to go make yourself useful. The average workday is sun up to sundown. No holidays, no weekends, no naps. Your community believes in spirits, dozens of them. Every cough, eclipse, or failed hunt is blamed on invisible beings you have to appease with food offerings, blood, or both. One mistake, and someone's getting sacrificed. Could be a goat. Could be you. Lucky you. But hey, you've got storytelling. Around the fire, elders share myths about sky gods, snake demons, and glowing caves. One whispered tale hints at a land of endless food and no sickness across the sea, but no one's ever seen it. It's just bedtime fantasy. Still, it's the only thing that helps you fall asleep amid the mosquitoes. Your brain is sharp. Modern research shows prehistoric humans were just as intelligent as we are today. But your reality offers zero time for philosophy. You're too busy not dying. One wrong move, and your name is just a scratch mark on a cave wall. If you even get a name, And worst of all, you have no idea how bad you have it. There's no historical record yet, no before times to compare your misery to. You think this is normal. You think pain is just part of being alive. But don't worry, your descendants will eventually invent cities, trade routes, and full-blown civilization. Spoiler, it doesn't help much. In fact, things are about to get weirder, louder, and way more violent. Now you're not just some bug-bitten child in the mud anymore. It's a few thousand years later, and you're lucky enough, depending on your definition of luck, to be born in ancient Mesopotamia, the so-called cradle of civilization. Sounds cozy, right? Except the cradle is made of baked mud bricks. It's 110 degrees out, and your daily routine includes dodging floods, tyrants, and extremely judgmental gods. You live in a city-state like Ur or Babylon, where the streets are filled with stray goats, shouting merchants, and children slinging slingstones for fun. If you're a boy, you'll spend most of your life doing back-breaking labour or possibly joining the military by your teens. If you're a girl, you're property. That's not metaphor, it's law. The Code of Hammurabi straight up says your dad can sell you if he's in debt. So, there's that. Oh, and speaking of laws, congratulations, you live in one of the first societies with written rules. Unfortunately, they're brutal. Break a vase, lose a hand, steal a loaf of bread, into the canal with you. Historians still argue whether these laws were actually enforced or just performative public threats, like those no skateboarding signs in modern parking lots. You sleep in a one-room home built from sun-dried bricks that crumble every time it rains. Good thing you only get maybe 5 inches of rain a year, unless there's a flood, which does happen, often. And when the Tigris and Euphrates decide to go full chaos mode, your entire neighbourhood turns into a swamp of sewage and sorrow. Water is both life and death here. You rely on irrigation canals that your ancestors dug with stone tools, and maintaining them is a full-time job for thousands. The mud gives you food, yes, but it also gives you worms, trench foot, and the occasional drowning. The punishment for not keeping your canal clear? Spoiler. It's not a slap on the wrist. Your diet is slightly better than in the prehistoric days. Bread, beer, onions, lentils, but it's the same thing every day. Nutritional variety isn't a thing yet. You drink your beer through a straw to avoid chunks of barley. Imagine sipping a smoothie made of bread dough and regret. And then there's work. Unless you're part of the 1% elite, you're probably either hauling bricks, herding goats, or pressing reeds into clay tablets until your fingers bleed. Bricklaying is the national sport here, and every ziggurat, the grand, stair-stepped temples, was built by people like you, under blistering sun and constant shouting. Fun fringe tidbit. Mesopotamians may have invented the first version of the work week, 6 days on, 1 day off. So, yes, even the ancient Sumerians knew Mondays were awful. You're also being taxed constantly. Your crops, your labour, your sheep, all fair game. There's a scribe who shows up to measure how much grain you owe, and somehow it's always more than you actually have. You can't read or write, but the scribe can, and he's the one filling in the receipts. You do the math. Don't get sick, by the way. Your town's healer is probably a priest with a bronze scalpel and a handful of prayers. If you've got a headache, that's demonic wind. If your eye's infected, they might smear pulverized date pits on it. Somehow, that makes the crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier seem high-tech. Religious life here is intense. You're not just worshipping one god, you've got dozens. Each city has its own divine mascot, like Marduk, Ishtar, or Enlil. Forget to offer incense on the right day. Hope you weren't attached to your crops, livestock, or firstborn. Rituals are loud, bloody, and weird. And yes, animal sacrifice is on the regular menu. You don't go anywhere. Travel is dangerous, roads are terrible, and everyone outside your city-state is considered suspicious, if not downright evil. Trade exists, sure, but only the rich benefit from it. You see exotic goods, like lapis lazuli or tin, and immediately assume the gods sent them. You're not wrong, just very uninformed. One thing Mesopotamia does have going for it: writing. The earliest known form, cuneiform, starts here, etched into clay tablets with a stylus. If you're part of the elite scribe class, congrats. You get to sit indoors. If not, those tablets are just receipts you'll never read. Imagine having your entire life dictated by stone Excel spreadsheets in a language you don't understand. As for education, unless you're male and rich, forget it. Schools are for future scribes only, and they are not fun. Archaeologists found ancient homework with notes from students that basically say, "Please stop hitting me." The earliest detention slips in history. Nighttime is eerie. No streetlights, just flickering oil lamps. The wind howls across the plains, jackals laugh in the dark, and somewhere, a priest chants to banish the storm demon Lamashtu. You lie awake on your woven mat, trying not to breathe too loudly, because your neighbour is convinced their goat is possessed and might start hexing people at random. You survive one day at a time. There's no retirement, no concept of following your dreams. Your dream is maybe not getting whipped tomorrow, but hey, you're part of the first true civilization. Brick by brick, you're helping build the future. Just not one you'll ever live to see. It's hot and dry, and you're hauling stones the size of your torso up a slope that wasn't meant for humans. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where the monuments are big, but the suffering is bigger. You've been born during the time of the pyramids, and if you thought Mesopotamia was rough, wait until you feel your spine compress under the weight of divine ambition. The year? Let's call it 2500 BCE. You're likely a peasant or labourer, which in Egypt means expendable asset with sandals. You live near the Nile, which floods every year and gives you food, sometimes. Other years, it either doesn't flood at all or floods too much, and both are catastrophes. Too dry, and your crops die. Too wet, and so do your goats. You don't own land. The pharaoh does. He also owns your labour. And your taxes? Paid in grain, livestock, and blood sweat equity. Let's talk about those pyramids. No, you're not enslaved exactly. Historians still argue whether pyramid workers were paid labourers or conscripted farmers. But guess what? You're not volunteering. The pharaoh's officials show up, and next thing you know, you're in a quarry chipping stone under a sky that never stops glaring. Your tools? Copper chisels, stone hammers, and, occasionally, your bare hands. Your lunch? Bread and beer again? Egypt's version comes with sand baked in, because grain mills were basically giant stone grinders. Dental care? Non-existent. Most Egyptians had teeth worn down to the nerves. You've got toothaches by 12 and abscesses by 15. That glamorous golden mask of Tutankhamun. Yeah, he probably had horrible breath and scoliosis. And yet, your world looks stunning, on the surface. White limestone pyramids shimmer on the horizon. Temple columns tower like petrified forests. You hear prayers echo in stone halls and smell incense in the air. But that elegance belongs to the elite. You're stuck building it, breaking your back while the priests chant for a good afterlife you probably won't get. Religion rules everything. The gods are everywhere, hawk-headed, jackal-faced, or croc-jawed. If a cow walks through your doorway, it might be sacred. If a cat dies, you better mourn hard or get fined. Fun fringe fact. Ancient Egyptians shaved their eyebrows when their cats died. Deep grief. Or very judgmental pets. Your daily life is micromanaged by superstition. You wear charms to ward off evil. You mumble spells under your breath when you eat, bathe, or cough. Get sick. A doctor might prescribe honey mixed with dung, or force you to drink powdered mummy. Yes, like ground up embalmed corpses. It's gross. But hey, mummies were medicine for centuries. You might be married by 13. Kids follow fast. If you're a woman, childbirth is less miracle and more death lottery. Midwives help when they can, but complications. You're on your own. There's no anaesthesia, no antiseptic, and the birthing bed is a dirt floor. When you're not farming or hauling stone, you're serving the bureaucracy. Egypt invented one of the world's first administrative states. Everything is recorded. What you grow, what you eat, who you marry, and how many donkeys you've borrowed this season. Can't pay taxes. Time to cough up a daughter for temple service. Or worse, conscription for your son. And yet, it all looks so advanced. They have geometry, calendars, paper made from papyrus, and stunning art. But none of that stops the hunger, or the epidemics, or the endless labour. The elite might recline on reed mats, sipping date wine under painted ceilings, but you're sweating in a mud brick hut with a leaky roof and a rat named Cleo who keeps stealing your onions. The Nile is your lifeline, but it's also your enemy. Crocodiles patrol the waters. So do hippos, surprisingly aggressive. Terrifying beasts who can outrun your scrawny legs. Try washing clothes near one, and you'll end up as a very unfortunate hieroglyph. And warfare? Not constant, but definitely present. Nubians to the south, Hittites to the north. If you're conscripted into the army, you're handed a spear and a piece of leather and told to protect the divine order. Which is rich, considering the divine order wants you to die young and sweaty. At night, you pray to Osiris for a peaceful afterlife. But you know the truth. Only the rich get fancy burials. You'll be wrapped in cheap linen and dumped into a communal grave with a half-empty beer jug as your only offering. The Book of the Dead? You'll never read it. You'll never afford it. Still, some moments shine. You laugh with family over a fire. You sing folk songs about crops and crocodiles. You feel pride when your child takes their first step on unsteady legs, in a world that's anything but steady. And then the priests announce a new monument, a bigger one, higher than the last. And suddenly you're back in the quarry, back in the dust, back in the heat. Your name won't be remembered, but your sweat will hold up a tomb that tourists gawk at 4 years later. Silver lining. You helped build one of humanity's most iconic wonders. You just didn't live long enough to admire it. It's another scorcher, but this time you're in the Indus Valley, roughly 2000 BCE. You've never heard of Mesopotamia or Egypt, and they've never heard of you either. Your city is called Mohenjo-Daro, or maybe Harappa, and for once, things seem oddly peaceful. You live in a neatly planned urban grid with actual drainage systems, public wells, and standardized brick sizes. Sounds like progress, right? Too bad you're living right before it all collapses. You're born into a civilization that's weirdly ahead of its time. There are no obvious palaces, no giant statues of rulers, and almost no evidence of war. Historians still argue whether this was a utopia or just a bureaucratic mystery box we haven't fully decoded. But one thing's clear. You're surrounded by craftsmanship and organisation that puts later empires to shame. Your house has multiple rooms and even a rudimentary toilet. You wash up using water from a shared well that's shockingly clean, by ancient standards. Anyway, you eat lentils, rice, fish, and fruit. You even use standardised weights and measures in the market. For a hot minute in history, you're not just surviving, you're kind of thriving. But something's off. The river you depend on, the mighty Gagahakra, is drying up or shifting course. Or maybe it's flooding too often. Scholars still debate whether climate change, tectonic activity, or over-farming caused the decline. All you know is the monsoon isn't what it used to be, and every year your crops look a little sadder. Trade routes to Mesopotamia are faltering. Boats stop coming. Goods stop moving. Some people leave. Others hoard grain. There's no standing army, no strongman ruler to keep things in check. So when things start breaking down, it's a slow, quiet unravelling, like mould creeping through the walls of your city. There's also disease. With dense populations and stagnant water, outbreaks spread like gossip in a village square. You don't have a word for epidemic, but you know what it means when 3 neighbours die in 1 week and the goats won't stop bleating at nothing. You're not sure who to pray to. The Indus Valley left behind no readable texts, just seals with strange symbols and unicorn-like creatures. Maybe they mean something. Maybe they're receipts. Maybe they're spells. No one knows. You place a small statue of a mother goddess on your windowsill, just in case. What's creepy is how fast things go quiet. The great bath at Mohenjo-Daro, once filled with ceremonial water, sits dry. The kilns stop firing. The bricks start to crumble. No signs of fire. No signs of conquest. Just emptiness. A population of tens of thousands, evaporating like morning mist. You try to carry on, but water is harder to find. Crops fail. The weather's too dry 1 year, too wet the next. People begin migrating east, toward the Ganges. You're just a kid, but even you can sense the tension in the air. Arguments flare. Neighbours disappear. One morning, you wake up and your best friend's house is abandoned, the hearth cold. And there are whispers of people from the northwest. Strange speaking, horse-riding newcomers with different gods and sharper weapons. Historians still argue whether the so-called Aryan migration caused the collapse, or merely filled the vacuum afterward. Either way, your world is ending, and no one's writing down why. You pack what little you have, some grain, a copper pot, your lucky bead necklace, and follow your family east. The roads are crowded with other families doing the same. Some walk barefoot. Some carry the sick on slings. The air is dry and the dust never settles. One last look back at the city reveals broken walls, silent streets, and a statue of a bearded priest-king staring blankly into the future. He won't see it. Neither will you. As you trudge into the unknown, you realise something. You lived in one of the most advanced urban cultures in the ancient world, and now it's gone, erased by time, flood, or fireless collapse. And no one will ever know your name. Your writing is undeciphered, your gods forgotten, your history reduced to pottery shards and crumbling bricks. On the bright side, at least you had indoor plumbing before Rome ever dreamed of aqueducts. Small victories. Now you're in ancient China, somewhere in the early Zhou dynasty, call it 1000 BCE. You're born into a farming village, which basically means your whole life is a mashup of back pain, millet porridge, and mandatory ancestor worship. You wake up before dawn to the sound of roosters and your mother yelling. Your day starts with hauling water and ends with blisters the size of dumplings. China's early dynasties are just starting to form a coherent state, but let's not get too excited. You're not in the Forbidden City sipping tea under silk lanterns. You're out in the sticks, dodging bandits and digging ditches. The Zhou kings claim they rule by the mandate of heaven, which sounds nice, until a flood, famine, or earthquake happens. Then, guess what? Heaven revoked its mandate. Time for a new dynasty. You just hope you're not around when it switches. You live in a hut with a thatched roof, shared with goats, chickens, and at least 3 generations of extended family. Privacy doesn't exist. You sleep on woven mats and eat the same 2 things daily. Millet porridge and pickled vegetables. Protein? Rare. When a pig is slaughtered, it's a festival. When you catch a rat, it's Tuesday. Medicine is rudimentary. Got a fever? You're burned with moxa sticks or given crushed herbs that taste like despair. Got a fracture? The village healer may attempt to realign your bones by yanking on your arm while shouting poetry. Historians still argue whether early Chinese medicine was miraculous or just guesswork with cool names. You work the land. Always. From age 6. You're weeding rice paddies or guiding oxen through sticky mud. One wrong step, and your foot sinks knee-deep in a leech-infested pool. You learn early that life is labour, and labour is life. There's no escape unless you're born into nobility, and you weren't. War is a constant threat. Zhou China is a patchwork of feuding states, and when two lords disagree over land or marriage, it's spear time. If you're a male over 12, you might get dragged into local militia duty. You're handed a bronze dagger axe and some bark armour and told to defend honour. What you're actually defending is a muddy hill your lord barely remembers owning. Religion is everywhere. You burn incense to ancestors, leave offerings on altars, and follow strict rituals that seem arbitrary but could decide your afterlife. The dead are honoured obsessively, which means grave robbing is both a job and a capital offence. Your uncle's cousin was caught once. No one talks about him anymore. And education? Only if you're rich and male. Then you might get tutored in poetry, calligraphy, and how to sit properly in front of a duke. You, though, can't read or write. You know 50 glyphs, maybe, carved into bamboo strips for counting grain. They say Confucius will be born in a few hundred years. Until then, knowledge is mostly locked behind silk screens. Still, there's beauty in your brutal world. Lanterns floating on rivers during the Ghost Festival. Folk songs sung to the moon. Intricate bronze bells used in ceremonies that send shivers down your spine. And don't forget the dumpling-shaped stones you play with while hiding from chores. Fun fringe fact. Ancient Chinese people sometimes buried servants alive with dead nobles. Human sacrifices weren't just myths. They were real, especially in the earlier Shang period. You better hope your local ruler prefers pottery replicas instead of actual people in his tomb. Disasters are everywhere. Earthquakes rattle your hut at random. Locust swarms devour crops in minutes. One year the Yellow River floods and wipes out your entire harvest. The next, it dries up. Your village elders say the dragon spirits are angry. You're not sure if that's true, but it explains a lot. You marry young, usually to someone chosen by your parents. Romantic love is considered inefficient. You're expected to have kids fast, sons, specifically. Daughters are helpful, but they leave when they marry, so investing too much in them is seen as a waste. Brutal, yes, but practical by ancient standards. Life expectancy hovers around 30. You measure your years not in birthdays, but in harvests survived. Your bones ache by 25, your teeth start falling out by 28, and by 32, you're considered a respected elder, mostly because no one else your age is still alive. And yet, despite the mud, disease, backbreaking labour, and looming war, there are moments. Watching fireflies blink over rice paddies, hearing your grandmother chant an old song while shelling beans, laughing at your baby brother trying to catch a frog. You hold on to those, because the dynasty will fall. They always do. Maybe from invasion, maybe from rebellion, maybe from within. But you'll keep planting, keep praying, and keep ducking when your lord's tax collector shows up with that look that says, "You owe more than you got." Sevens. It's not heaven, but it's home. The sun rises over the Aegean, and you're just a speck in the glory of ancient Greece. You're not Plato. You're not Alexander. You're the guy who hauls amphoras until your spine gives out. Or maybe you're chained to the oar bench of a trireme, sweating through your fifth war you don't understand and won't survive. Welcome to democracy, for some. Let's say you're in Athens, around 430 BCE. The city is buzzing with debate, drama, and disease. If you're a citizen, and that's a big if, you can vote. But odds are you're not. You might be a metic, a resident foreigner, or more likely, a slave. Roughly a third of the population is enslaved, and no one's trying to abolish it. In fact, Aristotle says slavery is natural. Real comforting, right? You start your day early, hauling water from a public fountain. Your house has no plumbing, no insulation, and no sense of privacy. Your neighbours can hear you cough through the walls. The streets smell like olive oil, sweat, and sewage. There's no sanitation system, just open ditches and chamber pots flung out windows with a yell of warning, if you're lucky. You eat barley bread, onions, olives, and maybe some salted fish. Meat? Only on feast days, and you're not on the guest list. You work all day, farming, crafting, or rowing, and still struggle to feed your family. If you're enslaved, you don't even have that. You're a living tool, bought and sold, without legal personhood. Historians still argue whether Greek slavery was more domestic than Roman brutality, but when you're the one in chains, the debate's a little academic. And then there's war. Constant, cyclical, exhausting war. Athens and Sparta are like divorced parents who hate each other but still share custody of Greece. You get conscripted, handed a spear and a bronze helmet, and marched into the Peloponnesian War. You fight for honour, or glory, or just to survive long enough to limp home. If you're lucky, you row a trireme. Not because it's safe, because it's one of the few jobs open to poor free men. The captain shouts. The drum pounds. You pull the oar in rhythm with dozens of other desperate souls. Your hands blister, your back screams, and every moment smells like salt, mould, and vomit. If the ship rams another, you better pray you're not in the lower deck. Those guys don't get out. And while all this is happening, the elites are discussing philosophy. Socrates is walking around barefoot, asking annoying questions. You pass by and hear, "What is justice?" You think, justice would be getting a lunch break, and keep walking. Fun fringe fact. Socrates was so irritating in public that a jury sentenced him to death with actual enthusiasm. He drank poison while his students wept. You? You drink watered-down wine and try to avoid a hernia. Art and theatre thrive. Sure. But the theatre is also state propaganda. Tragedies remind you that hubris leads to downfall. Comedies mock politicians, unless the politician is powerful. Then the jokes get mysteriously cut. You attend festivals like the Dionysia, where plays last all day and the crowd gets rowdy. But you don't sit in the front row, that's for VIPs. You're in the nosebleeds, dodging thrown olives and political slogans. Your gods are everywhere. Zeus might strike you down for lying. Athena watches your city, but she doesn't stop the plague that's now tearing through Athens. Crowded walls meant to keep Spartans out? They keep the disease in. You watch your neighbours die. You lose your child in 3 days. The priests say it's divine punishment. You say it's just life in Athens. Medicine is experimental. Hippocrates is just starting to suggest that disease might not be from angry gods, but from imbalanced humours. So instead of sacrifices, now you might get bloodletting. Not exactly a step up. And anaesthesia? Still a dream? You get surgery with nothing but wine and a firm grip on your own belt. If you're a woman, your world is even smaller. You can't vote, can't own property, and you're not supposed to be seen in public without a male escort. You might be married at 14 to a guy twice your age. Childbirth is your battlefield, and the casualty rate is high. Still, some days offer light. The sea breeze cools your skin. The hills smell of thyme and goat sweat. You hear a lyre song in the distance that makes your heart slow down. You sneak out at night with friends to drink, dance, and maybe recite a dirty poem by Sappho. But always, you return to work, or war, or slavery. The city of marble and genius and democracy is also a city of pain and inequality. The beauty is undeniable, but it's built on your broken back. You blink against the bright sun as the scent of rotting fish, dust, and human waste fills your nose. Rome, magnificent, monstrous, and marching steadily toward greatness, is now your home. It's the height of the Roman Empire, maybe 100 CE. But you're not Caesar. You're not even a senator. You're a pleb. Or worse, a slave in the world's first megacity. You live in a cramped, creaky insula. A Roman apartment block stacked 6 floors high, with no elevators and questionable architecture. The rent's high, the walls are thin, and the fire risk is constant. Your neighbour coughs blood into the wall every morning. Someone upstairs is definitely keeping a goat. You wake up early to avoid the crowds. The streets are already alive with noise, vendors yelling, carts clattering, pickpockets plotting. You try not to trip over puddles of urine. Indoor plumbing exists for the elite. You use the communal latrine, where everyone shares a sponge on a stick. Sanitation is not a strong point. Breakfast is crusty bread dipped in wine. If you're lucky, maybe a fig. Your job depends on the day. Some days you haul stone, others you clean gutters. Once, you were hired to hold a torch during a noble's dinner party. That's about as close to wealth as you've ever gotten. The toga you wear is second-hand, patched, and stiff from years of sweat. Rome is loud. Cartwheels rumble non-stop. People argue in Latin, Greek, and curses. There's always someone playing a flute badly. You walk past a graffiti-covered wall. One says, "I screwed the barmaid." Another says, "Beware of the dog." It's not a metaphor. Public baths offer your only real luxury. You go not just to get clean, but to socialise. Steam rises, old men argue politics, and kids cannonball into the cold plunge. The water's warm, the air's thick, and for one moment you forget how bad your back hurts. Until you get a boil, or an infected tooth, or a bad stomach from spoiled fish. Roman medicine is a strange mix of real anatomy and wild guesses. You might get leeches, or advice to rub crushed mouse brains on your wound. Historians still argue whether Roman doctors were ahead of their time, or just confident lunatics in white robes. Then there's the circus. You line up at the Colosseum for the free bread and games. Gladiators clash while the crowd roars. Beasts are loosed, lions, leopards, even elephants. The air smells like blood and grilled meat. You cheer, not because you enjoy the violence, but because if you don't, someone might notice. If you're lucky, you're in the stands. If not, you're in the arena. Fun fringe fact. Sometimes, sea battles, nomachie, were staged in flooded arenas or even artificial lakes. That's how far Rome would go to impress bored citizens. Actual naval combat, just for kicks. Religion is everywhere, but changing fast. One day, you're lighting incense for Jupiter. The next, some guy named Paul is preaching about a God who loves the poor. You're sceptical. You've never seen a God help a labourer like you. Still, you listen. He's got conviction, and sometimes that's enough. You get conscripted, eventually. Most men do. Maybe you join the legions and march off to Germania or Britannia. The armour chafes. The boots blister. The locals throw rocks and insults. You build forts, fight skirmishes, and shiver under foreign skies. If you live long enough, you might get land and citizenship. Or you die in a ditch, forgotten. Women? If you're one, your world is domestic. You grind grain, raise kids, and avoid scandal. If you step out of line, adultery, abortion, gossip, you could be exiled or worse. The law isn't on your side. Your father controls your life until your husband takes over. Freedom is something whispered behind veils. Night falls. The torches flicker. Street thugs roam. There's no police, just private guards, hired muscle, and random cruelty. You clutch your cloak and pray to your favourite household god for safe passage. You pass temples, taverns, and the occasional corpse. No one stops to check. And yet, somehow, Rome works. The aqueducts deliver water to fountains you're not allowed to touch. The roads stretch for thousands of miles. Grain ships arrive from Africa, olives from Hispania, marble from Greece. You live at the heart of an empire so vast it defies comprehension. But your own life? Small. disposable. Still, there's pride. You're Roman. Even if you're poor, you live in a world that's built to last. You've seen architecture that defies gravity, tasted spices from lands you'll never visit, and heard poets recite lines that make your chest ache. You've laughed, loved, cursed the gods, and survived, so far. Tomorrow, you'll do it again, and the Empire will march on, with or without you. You wake up in total darkness, not because it's midnight, but because you live in 700 CE, and night is pitch black unless you're rich enough to afford candles, which you're not. Welcome to what people used to call the Dark Ages. It's not all doom and gloom, but let's be honest, you're cold, sick, and possibly about to get robbed by your neighbour. You live in a crumbling village somewhere in post-Roman Europe. The Empire's gone. Cities have shrunk. Trade routes are collapsing. You grow your own food, sew your own clothes, and if something breaks, you pray it's fixable with a stick and a grunt. The nearest town is a 2-day walk through woods filled with wolves, bandits, and possibly a hermit who claims to be 150 years old. Your house is a smoky one-room hut with a thatch roof and no chimney. The fire pit's in the centre. The smoke has nowhere to go, so it hangs thick in the air, coating your lungs and stinging your eyes. You cough constantly, but so does everyone else. Fun fringe fact. People thought breathing in swamp fog gave you diseases. Technically wrong, yet. Not that wrong. You eat porridge. Again. Barley if you're lucky. Maybe a turnip. Meat is rare and usually salted beyond belief to preserve it. You drink beer, not because you're a party animal, but because the water might kill you. You're always slightly dehydrated and slightly buzzed. Honestly, it's a coping mechanism. You don't bathe often. Water's too cold. Soap? If it exists, it's made from ashes and animal fat. Your hair is stiff, your nails are black, and your feet haven't been dry since last spring. You share lice with your family. They're your most reliable roommates. Work. Non-stop. Farming takes every ounce of daylight. And that's not much in winter, where the sun barely shows its face and snow traps you indoors for days. Your tools are primitive. Your animals are scrawny, and your plough is basically a glorified stick. You can't read or write, neither can anyone you know. Books are rare, expensive, and mostly written in Latin by monks who live in stone buildings and pray 8 times a day. Your world is oral, stories, songs, warnings passed down by word of mouth. Your grandma remembers the Romans. You barely understand what a Rome is. And speaking of religion, Christianity is spreading fast. The village priest is one of the few who can read, and he tells you what God wants, usually obedience and tithes. But pagan traditions still cling in the shadows. People carve runes into doorposts and whisper to old gods when the crops fail. Historians still argue how much Christianity blended with pre-Christian beliefs versus stamping them out entirely. One night, a monk passes through. He's pale, tired, and kind of smells like damp parchment. He tells you of saints and demons, of paradise and eternal fire. You try to listen, but your stomach growls louder than he preaches. Crime is common. With no strong government, justice is often who's got more cousins with swords. You settle disputes with oaths, duels, or by tossing someone in a river to see if they float. If they do, they're guilty. If they drown, oops. If you're a woman, your life revolves around birth, death, and back-breaking labour. Childbirth is terrifying. You might survive, but your baby might not. Or vice versa. No midwives, no doctors. Just hope and herbs. If you make it to old age, you become a village elder, half feared, half respected, and maybe mistaken for a witch. One silver lining. Fewer wars than in big empires. But that doesn't mean peace. Local skirmishes, raiders from the north, and internal feuds still plague the countryside. You hear tales of distant kings and kingdoms, Charlemagne, the Saxons, the Byzantines, but they might as well be dragons and giants. You fear things modern folks don't even think about. Famine, fire, wolves, toothaches, breech births, and the wrong shape of a mole on your arm. You don't fear taxes, because taxes, at least, are predictable. Everything else? A toss-up. And yet, people endure. You laugh around the fire. You sing old songs under the stars. You learn to recognise seasons by scent. You feel wonder at a sudden rainbow or a rare flower blooming near your garden. You dream of heaven, even if you're not sure what it looks like. The world is rebuilding. Slowly. Monasteries copy ancient books. Trade begins again, trickling down rivers. There's a sense, barely a whisper, that maybe, someday, things will be better. But for now, you hold tight to what little you have. Warmth, bread, and someone to share them with. You wake up to the sound of a rooster and the smell of manure again. It's 1150 CE, and you're in medieval Europe, smack in the middle of the feudal system. And guess what? You're not a knight. You're not a monk. You're not even a merchant. You're a serf, which is basically a peasant with fewer rights than your lord's favourite hunting dog. Your village is tiny. Just a handful of cottages, a church, and maybe a blacksmith if you're lucky. Everyone knows everyone. You're tied to the land not by affection, but by law. You can't leave without permission. You can't marry without permission. And if you die, your children owe your lord a death tax for your privilege of being deceased. The land you work, not yours. The tools, also not yours. You farm strips of your lord's field, giving him a fat chunk of your harvest. What do you get in return? Protection, which usually means he builds a wooden fence and occasionally chases off bandits with a pitchfork. You wake before dawn, every day. Your feet are cracked. Your hands are blistered. Your diet? Bread, onions, cabbage, and if you're lucky, a bit of ale and a smidge of cheese. Your teeth are already rotting by 20. You eat everything with your hands. Forks? Fancy people stuff. Your clothes are rough wool, usually damp, and smell faintly of smoke and goat. You wear the same outfit for weeks. Bathing? Rare. The village bathhouse, if it exists, is used maybe once a month. Soap is harsh, made from ash and lard. It feels like scrubbing yourself with hot gravel. Education? Not a thing. You've never seen a book. The priest reads Latin scriptures on Sunday, but it may as well be spells from Mars. You know stories, though tales passed down, warning you about forest spirits, saints, and demons that steal children. Historians still argue how much of medieval belief was religious doctrine versus leftover folklore with new names. Women have it even rougher. Marriage happens young. Childbirth is still a dice roll with no anaesthesia and zero privacy. If you're not married, you might end up as a servant or worse. If you're widowed, you'd better remarry fast, or become the village wise woman, which sounds nice until someone accuses you of witchcraft. And yes, witch hunts are a thing. Not everywhere, not all the time, but enough to keep you uneasy. A failed harvest? A baby born with a birthmark? That's a witch. Or at least, someone who looks at the Lord's wife funny. Speaking of lords, theirs is the life you'll never live. They feast on venison, wine, roasted fowl. You eat stale barley bread and whatever root you can dig up. Their homes have fireplaces and tapestries. Yours has a smoke hole and rats. Entertainment is rare, but when it happens, it's chaos. Festivals, market days, and travelling jesters bring laughter and noise. There's music, rough dancing, maybe a puppet show involving demons and fart jokes. For a moment, everyone forgets the crushing weight of existence and just enjoys being muddy and alive. One quirky fact: medieval folks loved animals in trials. Like actual court trials. Pigs were prosecuted for trampling children. Locusts were excommunicated. Snails got legal representation. This sounds absurd now, but back then, it was deadly serious. You hear the stories and think, at least I'm not that pig. 7s. You're expected to attend church every Sunday. The priest reminds you that suffering is holy and heaven is better than this. You nod, even if your stomach growls too loud to hear the sermon. Faith is your balm, your answer to everything you can't explain, which is most things. You fear the forest. Not just for wolves and outlaws, but for getting lost forever. You fear leprosy, famine, war, and cold. Especially cold. Winter kills. It creeps into your bones and stays. There's no central heating. Just a shared blanket, a small fire, and someone's foot in your ribs. And war? It's not just for nobles. Sometimes, your village is dragged into it, drafted to dig trenches or feed armies. Or worse, caught in the middle. A passing army takes your grain, your ox, maybe your daughter. You call it God's will, because that's safer than calling it theft. But despite it all, life isn't without moments. You love. You laugh. You tell stories by firelight. You trade gossip and dreams with friends. You share bread with neighbours and watch the stars when the air is clear. You dance around a maypole once a year and feel, for a few hours, like the world might be okay. 7s, until your lord calls for more taxes. Then it's back to the fields, to the grind, to the dirt under your nails and the prayer on your lips. Because hope is all you've got, and you cling to it, tight as you can. The jungle hums. The air is thick, so thick it sticks to your skin like syrup. You were born in the Maya world, somewhere between 800 and 900 CE, during what should have been a golden age. Monumental cities rise from the rainforest. Pyramids touch the sky. The calendar is precise, the astronomy dazzling. But something's off. The kings still reign, the rituals continue, but the cracks are widening, and you're about to feel them. You live in a city like Tikal or Copan, surrounded by towering temples carved with glyphs. The elite wear jaguar pelts and jade jewellery. You wear a woven tunic that hasn't been washed in weeks. You spend your days hauling wood, fetching water, or tending maize fields until your back cramps. It's humid, buggy, and the mosquitoes don't care who you are. Food is maize, beans, squash, and chilies. You grind corn by hand for hours every morning to make tortillas. Your hands are permanently dusted with mesa. If you're lucky, you get tamales. If you're really lucky, they don't have ants in them. You drink a cocoa paste drink sometimes, bitter and gritty, but it's reserved for special occasions. Or the elite. Or both. Religion shapes everything. The gods are everywhere. Sun gods, maize gods, rain gods, death gods, jaguar gods. You don't worship casually. You perform. You offer incense, food, blood. Blood especially. You prick your tongue, your ears, maybe even your genitals, to feed the gods. Pain isn't a side effect, it's the point. The elite take it further. Human sacrifice isn't an everyday thing, but it happens. War captives, slaves, sometimes even high-ranking nobles. Fun fringe fact. Some scholars believe ball game losers were sacrificed, but others think it was winners, honoured with death. Historians still argue which version is true. Either way, the stakes are high. You've seen the signs. Crops failing more often. Reservoirs drying up. Rulers getting more desperate. The kings still promise prosperity, still build monuments, still demand tribute, but the jungle is winning. Trees push through temples. Trade routes thin. War intensifies. Neighbouring cities start vanishing, not with explosions, but silence. You fear drought. Not just thirst, but the unravelling that follows. If the rains don't come, the maize doesn't grow. If the maize fails, the gods are angry. If the gods are angry, sacrifices increase. It's a vicious loop that ends with you lying face down on an altar, hoping your heart beats quietly enough to go unnoticed. The writing system is beautiful. Carved glyphs telling histories, poems, king lists. But you can't read it. Only scribes and nobles can. You see the images, the jaguars and serpents and gods with wild eyes, and you wonder if they're warnings. Maybe they were. You live with your extended family in a thatch-roofed house on raised stone. The floor is packed dirt. Your bed is a mat. You sleep with siblings, cousins, the occasional chicken. At night, the jungle buzzes with life. Howler monkeys scream like dying ghosts. You stay close to the fire. Medicine is a mix of herbs, chants, and symbolic gestures. Some of it works, like chewing bark for toothaches. Some of it, not so much. Get sick enough, and you might be left in the jungle to let the spirits decide. You learn early that every cough could be a god testing you. You go to the marketplace and hear gossip. Another city collapsed. A king murdered. A drought that turned the river black. The old people say this has happened before, that cities rise and fall like maize stalks. You listen, you worry, you keep working. One day, your family packs up and leaves, not in panic, just quiet resignation. The soil is spent. The reservoir is dry. You walk for days, searching for a new patch of land, another city that hasn't yet crumbled. You pass abandoned temples, overgrown plazas, steely toppled and cracked. This is how collapse looks. Not fire and ash, but absence. Not one big war, but many little losses. You don't know you're living through the classic Maya collapse. You just know your world is shrinking. Every year, there's less. Less food, less rain, less hope. And still, the rituals continue. You sing, you pray, you mark the stars, you bleed. Because what else can you do? The gods might be watching, or they might have already turned their backs. But you keep going, through the heat, the hunger, the ruins, because that's what people do, even when the world is falling down around them in silence. It starts with a cough, then a fever, then boils, huge, black, oozing things under your arms, on your neck, in your groin. You're in Europe, it's 1348, and the Black Death has arrived. You've never heard of bacteria, let alone Yersinia pestis. All you know is people are dying, fast, ugly, and in horrifying numbers. You wake up one morning and half the village is silent. The baker didn't open. The priest didn't ring the bell. A cart rolls by, piled with bodies and followed by someone shouting, "Bring out your dead!" You thought that was just a weird joke. Now it's your morning soundtrack. Your odds of survival? Not great. 1 in 3 people will die from this plague. Some towns wiped out completely. You don't know how it spreads. You think it might be bad air, or punishment from God, or maybe the Jews because panic turns people into monsters and mass scapegoating erupts. Entire communities are slaughtered. Historians still argue whether those reactions were driven by fear, ignorance, or just pure human cruelty. Doctors wear beaked masks filled with herbs, hoping to filter out the miasma. They look like cursed birds from a nightmare. Fun fringe fact. Those plague masks weren't widely used until later centuries, but they've become the unofficial mascot of medieval medicine. Spoiler. They didn't help. You pray more. You fast. You beat yourself with a whip because someone said the plague is God's punishment and pain might earn forgiveness. The flagellants march through town, bloody and wild-eyed, singing songs of doom. You try joining them. You still get sick. Food runs out. Trade halts. Farmers are dead, merchants are gone, and nobody wants to handle money touched by plague hands. The cities reek of death and fear. You flee to the countryside, only to find it's just as bad, if not worse. Your family is everything. And then suddenly, it's not. Your sister catches it. She cries, her skin turns black, she begs for help. You sit with her until the end, and then, quietly, you dig a grave. Maybe a shallow one, maybe none at all. The ground is too hard, and your strength is gone. The church offers answers, but they're getting sick too. Priests stop visiting the dying. Some flee, others stay and perish. Your faith is shaken. If this is God's will, he's being especially cruel, or maybe he's just gone. And yet, weirdly, there's opportunity. If you live. So many have died that labour is scarce. Wages rise. Serfs start bargaining for better conditions. Entire social structures wobble. Some people even get rich. You don't. But you hear the stories and dream, just a little. There are no real solutions. No vaccines. No sanitation. Just waiting, hoping, and trying not to touch anyone. When the worst passes, you're still here. Thinner. Greyer. But alive. You walk the empty village square and see doors still barred, windows still shuttered. You hear birds again, something that went silent when death was loudest. You never forget the smell. Rot. Smoke. Panic sweat. It lingers in your clothes and your dreams. You flinch when someone sneezes, and you carry that fear for the rest of your life. Eventually, the plague fades. People return, markets reopen, babies are born, and you go back to farming, praying, aging, haunted, but functioning, like a cracked statue still standing in the rain. Years later, you hear whispers of scholars in Italy writing about anatomy, perspective, and the idea that humans might understand the world through reason. You squint toward that light from the depths of this medieval tunnel and hope it's the dawn of something better. But you never forget 1348, the year the world seemed to end, one pus-filled boil at a time. You hear the hooves before you see them. The ground shakes. The sky darkens, not from clouds, but from smoke. You're in Central Asia, or maybe Eastern Europe, and it's the 1200s. And you've just met the Mongols. Or rather, they've met you. That buzzing you feel? That's the sound of your entire way of life being erased. Genghis Khan's empire is spreading like fire in dry grass, and your village is kindling. You wake up one morning, and your neighbours are already gone. No screams. No warning. Just scorched earth, broken fences, and a single arrow stuck in the gate. You don't even run. Where would you go? The Mongols don't mess around. Their army is fast, organised, and terrifying. They move in silence, then strike with overwhelming precision. You've never seen tactics like this. Feigned retreats, surprise flanks, psychological warfare. They cut off food supplies, poison wells, and drive refugees ahead of them like cattle. It's war, but on a scale that feels biblical. If they're in a good mood, they offer surrender. Submit and pay tribute, and you might live. Refuse, and the destruction is total. Entire cities levelled. Populations wiped out. Historians still argue whether the Mongols were unusually brutal or just better documented in their brutality. Either way, you're not arguing. You're hiding under a wagon, holding your breath. Let's say you survived the initial invasion. You're now part of the largest contiguous land empire in history. That comes with some perks. Trade routes are safer for a while. The Silk Road booms. Knowledge travels fast. Cultures mix in ways that hadn't happened in centuries. But you're still just trying not to starve. Your town is now under Mongol administration. That means new taxes, unfamiliar languages, and an occasional census where they count you like livestock. If you're educated, rare. You might get recruited as a clerk or translator. If not, it's back to the fields, only now you're feeding an empire that stretches from Korea to Hungary. And Mongol justice. Swift and simple. Steal a horse. Die. Insult an official. Die. Show up late for tax delivery. Probably also die. Law and order exists, but it's iron-fisted. You learn to nod, bow, and never make eye contact. Oddly enough, you hear stories of tolerance. The Mongols let people keep their religions. They value skilled labour. Artisans and engineers are sometimes spared, even treated well. One quirky fact. The Mongols were obsessed with siege weapons. If you knew how to build a catapult, you were golden. If not, well, your diet hasn't improved. If anything, food is scarcer. Wars wreck agriculture. Refugees pour in, desperate and sick. Disease spreads fast. Some scholars believe the Mongol trade routes helped transmit the Black Death from Asia to Europe. Which means, congratulations. You've now contributed to a future global pandemic. You live in fear, but you adapt. You learn a few Mongol words. You bury your valuables. You teach your children to stay quiet and keep their heads down. At night, you listen for hoofbeats and try not to imagine your home on fire. And then they move on. The empire keeps expanding, and your region is no longer the front line. What's left is a shell of what was. A half-rebuilt town, a burnt-out chapel, a handful of stories that don't make sense to outsiders. You grow old watching new soldiers patrol in silk-trimmed armour. You whisper the names of the dead when no one's listening. You tell your grandchildren about the time when the sky filled with arrows and fire, and their eyes widen, not with awe, but with that deep, inherited fear that history sometimes leaves behind. Because Mongol conquest wasn't just war, it was transformation through terror. And even if your house stands, and the wheat grows back, you'll never quite trust a quiet morning again. You smell oil paint and sweat. You hear church bells and coughing. You're in Italy, maybe Florence, around the year 1470. The Renaissance is blooming. Art, science, and humanism are lighting up the Western world. Everyone talks about genius and glory. But not you. You're not painting the ceiling of a cathedral. You're scraping candle wax off the floor. You're not in the Renaissance. You're cleaning up after it. If you're lucky, you're an apprentice in some artisan's cramped, mouldy workshop. You mix pigments, grind minerals, or fetch water from a stinking canal. Your boss takes credit for everything. You sleep near the fireplace, if you're lucky, and if you're not, in the storage room with the rats. Let's say you're a woman. Then your Renaissance is mostly laundry, childbirth, and maybe dying of a bladder infection before 30. You're not reading Machiavelli. You're hoping your husband doesn't sell you off to settle a debt. You don't get to study anatomy or sketch flying machines. You get to mop the blood from a birth gone wrong. And if you're poor, forget about art and ideas. You work, non-stop. You sweep streets, bake bricks, clean chamber pots. Or maybe you're on a galley ship, rowing until your hands are pulp. The elite might sponsor artists and philosophers, but they still step over beggars in silk shoes. You hear about the printing press. Revolutionary, right? But you can't read. Your priest can... Your lord can... You. Illiterate. You hear people murmuring about human potential, but all your potential is tied up in fixing the broken cartwheel before the ox dies. Sure, there's more food than during plague years. Markets buzz. Cities are growing. But urban life is still filthy. Open sewers run between houses. You throw waste out the window, and so does everyone else. The street below is a toxic soup of refuse and regret. Historians still argue whether Renaissance cities were cleaner than medieval ones, or just more stylishly dirty. There's also tension. New ideas about the universe, heliocentrism, anatomy, motion, clash with old religious beliefs. You hear rumours of people being arrested for questioning too much. One fringe fact. The Vatican once banned certain books and the printing of specific maps. Knowledge was powerful and dangerous. And the plague isn't gone. It comes back in waves. You know the drill. Coughing, fevers, bells, and mass graves. It's quieter now. More efficient. But no less terrifying. People still wear charms, burn herbs, and avoid the sick like they carry curses, which, in a way, they do. Art is everywhere. You walk past a fresco and think, nice colours. You don't know it's Botticelli. You don't care. You've got blisters from walking 6 miles to deliver a sack of flour. You pass cathedrals and palaces, marvelling at their scale, while your own ceiling leaks rain onto your face. War is constant, but smaller. City-states feud endlessly. Mercenary armies march back and forth, changing sides like it's a sport. You get drafted or taxed, or both. Your son is taken to fight in a war he doesn't understand, for a flag that changes depending on who bribed the most generals. Religion still rules. Your life is framed by feast days, saints, and sermons. You kneel. You confess. You hope. You light candles for miracles that never come. And if you question too loudly, there's an inquisition waiting in the wings. Even the great thinkers aren't safe. You hear whispers about a man dissecting corpses. Scandalous. Illegal. But he draws what he sees, and others call it genius. Leonardo, they say. You hear the name once, maybe twice, but you'll never see his notebooks. You'll never fly in his machines. You'll just deliver olive oil to someone who might have read about him. Still, you sense something shifting. The world feels more curious. Maps show more land. Sailors talk of new continents. There's energy in the air. But for you, it's just another day of work, prayer, and sleep. No revolutions, no inventions. Just the steady rhythm of survival. You live in the shadows of greatness, not inside its light. The Renaissance is dazzling, but from your corner of the world, it's more whisper than roar. It's the 1600s. Europe smells like gunpowder, wet wool, and human waste. You're born into a world that's technically post-medieval, but you wouldn't know it. This is the era of wigs, muskets, powdered faces, and the absolute worst jobs in history. Whatever social ladder exists, you're stuck to the bottom rung, and it's covered in horse dung. Let's say you're a child in London, or Paris, or Amsterdam. You don't go to school. You work. You start young, 6 or 7 if you're lucky, 4 if you're not. Your job? Could be chimney sweep. That means you crawl inside soot-coated shafts, scrubbing with a wire brush while coughing up black muck and hoping you don't get stuck. Some kids never come out. They call it getting lost in the flu. You just call it Tuesday. 7s. Or maybe you're a mudlark. You wade through freezing rivers at dawn, picking through sewage for coins, bones, or anything that might be resold. Your hands are numb, your feet are raw, and you smell like low tide in a dead harbour. Still better than starving. One fun fringe fact. The phrase, throw the baby out with the bathwater, comes from this era, because people bathed so rarely that everyone used the same tub, in order of importance. By the time the baby got in, the water was opaque. Historians still argue how often people really bathed back then, but by modern standards, almost never. You eat brown bread, weak beer, and whatever root vegetables survive the rats. You lose teeth early. Your gums bleed constantly. You hear people talk about scurvy and wonder if it's contagious. It's not. It's just what happens when you live on starch and sadness. And if you're a woman, let's not sugarcoat it. Childbirth is terrifying. Midwives rely on herbal teas, whispered prayers, and gravity. If the babies breach, you both might die. If you survive, you'll be pregnant again within a year. No one asks how you feel. You're expected to endure, quietly. Marriage is transactional. Love is optional. You marry who you're told to, or whoever needs help feeding livestock. If you're lucky, your husband is kind. If not, too bad. Domestic abuse laws barely exist. Divorce is almost impossible unless you're royalty. Your best option is to outlive him. Or, if you're clever, to accidentally forget to feed him during plague season. You've heard of science, maybe. Some guy named Galileo is saying the Earth moves around the sun. The church isn't thrilled. Another guy, Newton, talks about gravity. But those are elite ideas. You're more concerned with gravity pulling your dinner into the mud. Medicine is wild. Bloodletting is still in style. You get fevers, they drain you. You get weak, they drain you more. You're told to carry dried toads in your pocket to ward off the plague. You try it. You still get sick. Speaking of plague, it's not gone. There are outbreaks all over. One year it's London. The next, Vienna. The death carts roll again. You see fires set to purify the air. You smell burning sulphur and wonder if it's hell leaking out. War never stops. If you're male and breathing, someone wants to put you in a uniform. The 30 Years' War, the English Civil War, various religious conflicts. Pick one. They all need warm bodies. You're handed a pike or a musket and pointed toward the nearest battlefield. No armour, no strategy. Just loud noise and bad bread. You march through mud, sleep in barns, and dig graves more often than you eat meat. You lose friends to disease, not swords. Dysentery kills faster than any bullet. There are no antibiotics, no field hospitals, just whiskey and a blade. And yet, cities glitter from a distance. Aristocrats ride by in powdered wigs and carriages. You catch a glimpse of Versailles or the Tower of London and feel a mix of awe and disgust. Their dogs eat better than your family. Their perfume covers more disease than yours. Religion still rules. You pray daily. You fear eternal damnation. You light candles, kneel for hours, and whisper to saints, hoping someone's listening. But doubt creeps in. If God is just, why is your life this hard? And then, something new, whispers of revolution, philosophers writing about liberty, pamphlets calling for justice. You can't read them, but someone tells you what they say. And for the first time, you wonder, what if things could be different? But not for you. Not yet. Your job is to survive, sleep, and hope your child doesn't have to work in the same chimney you did. The ships are setting sail, but you're not going on a grand adventure. You're either chained below deck or praying they never land near your village. It's the 1700s, and the age of exploration has evolved into the age of colonialism. Europe is expanding outward, and if you're not part of the empire, you're its fuel. You could be in West Africa, watching your neighbours disappear. The slave trade is booming. Raids, betrayals, and outright invasions become routine. One day, your cousin is there. The next, he's gone, sold to a Portuguese or English trader and stuffed into the hold of a ship with barely enough room to breathe. You hear the screams long after they're gone. Maybe you're on that ship. The Middle Passage is a 3-month voyage of starvation, disease, and despair. You're shackled, beaten, dehumanized. If you survive, you'll arrive in the Caribbean or the American South, only to become property. Sugar, tobacco, cotton, these crops thrive on human misery. Historians still argue over how many died during the crossing. The range is millions. If you're born in the colonies, your life might look different, but not much better. As a settler's child, you're living in a log cabin, surrounded by wilderness, disease, and constant tension. Native peoples fight to keep their land, and you grow up hearing one-sided tales that paint them as monsters. Raids happen in both directions. And you're taught to fear everything outside the fence. You might be born into a native community. In that case, your world is collapsing. Smallpox blankets, forced relocation, and broken treaties haunt your generation. Your culture is under siege, your gods mocked, your language banned. Every sunrise brings the possibility that more of your world will be erased. Let's say you're in South Asia. The East India Company has arrived, and they're not here to make friends. They're here for profit. You see your village taxed into starvation. Your textiles are sold abroad while your weavers starve. British officers live in mansions while you carry bricks barefoot. Rebellion simmers. It always simmers. Or maybe you're an indigenous person in Australia. The colonists arrive with sheep, muskets, and maps that don't show you. Your land is declared empty. Your people are treated like wildlife, and your stories are silenced. You fight. You die. And then they write history without your name. And then there's the missionary. Wherever you are, Africa, the Americas, the Pacific, someone's trying to save your soul. You're told your gods are demons. Your rituals are sinful. Your body is something to be clothed, tamed, and used. Baptism isn't optional. Neither is obedience. Back in Europe, life isn't much better unless you're rich. Cities grow, but they stink. London and Paris overflow with people, filth, and rats. You step over beggars and vomit on your way to work. You read newspapers full of optimism while coughing up blood from coal dust. Your job might involve whale blubber, cannonballs, or plantation sugar, all of it brutal, all of it global. The economy is booming for the upper class. You're part of the machine that makes it happen. You mine. You haul. You die quietly. Medicine is evolving but still terrifying. Surgeries happen without anesthesia. Disease outbreaks are frequent. One fringe fact. In some colonies, doctors used enslaved people as test subjects. You hear whispers of cruel experiments and thank the sky that it wasn't you this time. Religion justifies everything. Colonizers claim to bring light to savage lands. Sermons talk about divine order and chosen people. You kneel at gunpoint. You sing hymns in chains. Still, rebellion grows. Slave revolts erupt across the Caribbean. Native resistance slows expansion. Colonists begin questioning their rulers. You hear words like liberty and freedom tossed around by people who own slaves. You wonder what those words really mean. Your life is squeezed between empire and survival. You don't get to explore the new world. You are the cost of its discovery. And every flag raised means someone else's story gets buried. The sky is grey. The air tastes like coal. You're 10 years old, and your fingers are black with soot. Welcome to the Industrial Revolution, where progress roars, gears grind, and childhood disappears into the belly of a factory. It's the early 1800s in Britain, or maybe the northeastern United States. Cities are exploding with growth, smoke, and the smell of boiling dye. If you're a kid, you're not playing. You're working. Long hours. Tiny spaces. Dangerous machines. You squeeze between spinning cogs to retrieve a broken spool. One wrong move, and you lose a finger, or your life. It happens every day. Your parents can't help. They're working too. Your father might be down in a coal mine, swinging a pickaxe in the dark, lungs filling with dust that'll kill him before 40. Your mother works in a textile mill, inhaling fibre lint that slowly chokes her. Everyone's coughing. Everyone's tired. No one gets a day off. Your house is one room, if you're lucky. A leaky shack if you're not. No plumbing. No heating. You share a mattress with 3 siblings and a dog that might be part rat. You wash in a basin once a week. Maybe. The river outside runs brown from dye waste. You wouldn't dare drink from it. Or fish in it. Sometimes the fish glow. Your food, mostly bread, tea, and potatoes. If you get meat, it's probably questionable. Fresh vegetables are a rumour. You drink weak beer because the water is poison. You're always a little hungry. Your teeth are already rotting. Education is optional, and for most, unaffordable. Some kids go to ragged schools, learning just enough to read signs and obey orders. You dream of books. You get rule books and warning posters about proper factory conduct. Let's say you're a girl. Then you're still working 12 to 14 hours a day, but you're also expected to help raise siblings, cook, and avoid eye contact with your supervisor. If you get pregnant, you're on your own. Illegitimate children are shunned. So are their mothers. Historians still argue whether industrialization empowered women through wages or simply doubled their burden. The machines are loud, deafening. You shout to be heard over looms and presses. By 30, you're half deaf. By 40, you're hunched, arthritic, and coughing blood. There are no safety nets, no insurance, no breaks unless you're bleeding, and even then, it depends who's watching. Unions, maybe someday. For now, they're illegal or crushed quickly. You strike, you starve. It's that simple. One fringe fact. In some cities, workers were paid in company scrip, fake currency only usable at overpriced company stores. A closed loop of exploitation. You walk to work in darkness and walk home in darkness. The streets are slick with filth. Children cry, adults stumble, gin is everywhere. It's cheap, numbing, and kills the pain until it kills everything else. And yet, you hear whispers. Machines that make life easier, telegraph wires, railways. Things are changing, fast. You see locomotives thundering by, great beasts of steel and steam, and wonder where they go. Probably somewhere better. The rich live differently. Clean clothes, hot baths, time to think. They attend lectures on moral improvement while you work 84 hours a week. They marvel at Dickens novels inspired by your misery. Religion offers some comfort. Churches open soup kitchens. Missionaries preach temperance. You kneel, pray, and listen. You hope there's more to life than soot, hunger, and long hours. Sometimes you laugh. A joke shared at the factory. A song hummed while scrubbing the floor. A flower growing between cobblestones. Hope is stubborn. You hold it close. But mostly, you work. Childhood ends before it begins. Adulthood is labour. Old age is rare. The machines don't care. The bosses barely notice. The world moves forward, gears grinding, powered by your exhaustion. The trench is cold. Mud fills your boots. Rats scurry over your legs while shells scream overhead. It's 1916, and you're in the middle of World War I, the war to end all wars, or so they say. But all you know is the stench, the hunger, and the constant, gnawing fear that your next breath might be your last. You're a soldier, most likely. Drafted or volunteered under pressure. You trained for maybe 6 weeks before being tossed into the meat grinder that is the Western Front. You live in a trench, 6 feet deep, filled with water, crawling with lice. The latrine is a hole. The food is tinned beef and stale biscuits. You haven't seen a vegetable in months. Sleep is a luxury. Bullets fly at random. The walls cave in during rain. Gas attacks come without warning. You scramble for your mask, praying it's not cracked. One deep inhale of chlorine or mustard gas, and your lungs become liquid. You drown, coughing foam. Historians still argue whether gas was more feared than bullets, or just another horror in a lineup too long to process. You fire your rifle, but mostly you wait. Wait for orders. Wait for death. Wait for someone to tell you this nightmare matters. You write letters home, stained with dirt and sweat. You lie to your mother. I'm safe, you say, knowing full well your best friend was vaporized yesterday. Behind the lines, civilians suffer too. Food is rationed. Fuel is scarce. Women take factory jobs, sewing uniforms and building bombs. One fringe fact: some women working with TNT developed yellow skin from chemical exposure. They were called Canary Girls. Bright nickname. Grim job. If you're from a colonized nation, you might be fighting for a country that doesn't even recognize you as a citizen. Indian soldiers, African troops, Aboriginal regiments, they bleed for empires that see them as disposable. You're promised respect, then buried in unmarked graves. If you survive, your reward is silence. Commanders plan offensives from miles away, sipping tea. You go over the top, charging into no man's land, a cratered hellscape of wire, mud, and corpses. Machine guns tear through your unit in seconds. You keep running, even when it makes no sense. Orders are orders. The war drags on. New tech appears. Tanks, airplanes, flamethrowers. None of it makes you feel safer. The machines get deadlier. The strategy's more reckless. You hear terms like attrition and realise they mean you. You are the attrition. Back home, things aren't better. If you're wounded, you return with missing limbs, shell shock, or burns no one can look at. There's no real therapy, just stiff upper lips and morphine. If you're lucky, you get a wooden leg and a medal. If not, you get forgotten. Civilians endure bombing raids, food riots, and a flu pandemic that kills more people than the war itself. One day you're dodging shrapnel. The next, you're coughing blood in a hospital overcrowded with stretchers. The world is unravelling from every angle. And yet, you carry on. You joke with comrades, share cigarettes, trade stories. Every laugh feels like rebellion. Every sunrise you witness is a tiny miracle. The war ends in 1918, but there's no parade in your trench. Just silence. You're told it's over, but it doesn't feel over. You're thinner, older, and haunted. The world promised honour and glory. What you got was mud, rats, and loss. You return home to find things changed. Jobs are gone. Cities are different. People don't understand. They say, "You're lucky you made it back." You nod. You don't talk about the dreams, the sounds, the smell of death that never leaves your nostrils. You survived the Great War, but part of you never left the trench. It starts with a headline, then a whisper, then a marching sound that never seems to stop. It's 1941, and the world is at war, again. You're born into chaos, or maybe you were just a kid when everything shattered. Either way, World War II is no longer an event on the radio. It's your everyday reality. You live in London, or Warsaw, or Tokyo. Doesn't matter. Cities are targets now. You wake up to sirens, dive into shelters, and clutch your knees while the earth above you shakes. Bombs fall. Buildings vanish. Sometimes your neighbour's house is just gone in the morning. You step around rubble like it's just another puddle. If you're in London, it's the Blitz. Night after night, the sky flashes and hums. You ration butter, sugar, meat, everything. Your mum waters down the soup and pretends it's just as good. You sleep with your clothes on, just in case. A backpack with gas masks hangs by the door like a new family member. In Germany, you're told the fatherland is winning. You wear a Hitler Youth uniform, salute in class, and chant slogans you don't understand. But you notice things. Empty desks, neighbours who disappear, whispers behind doors. There's a silence that says everything loud. If you're in the Soviet Union, God help you. The siege of Leningrad means eating wallpaper paste and boiled shoes. Winter takes as many lives as bullets. You watch your brother go to the front at 15 and never come back. Your family survives off frozen bread and hope. You might be in Asia. In Nanjing, the massacre leaves your world soaked in horror. In the Philippines, you run from soldiers who don't speak your language. In Hiroshima or Nagasaki, you see a flash, then nothing. Your skin burns. Your city evaporates. One moment, it's home. The next, it's a crater. Historians still argue whether the atomic bomb saved lives or committed the unforgivable. If you're Jewish in Europe, you're hunted, rounded up, moved to ghettos, then trains, then camps. You hear words like relocation. You don't know they mean gas chambers. You don't believe it until you're standing in line, holding your child, and the guards point left or right, and then nothing makes sense ever again. Let's say you're American. You might be drafted at 18, sent to boot camp, then shipped off to Normandy, or the Pacific, or North Africa. You land under gunfire. You see your friends fall. You lose parts of yourself you'll never get back. If you're not white, your uniform still doesn't shield you from racism before, during, or after the war. Back home, your girlfriend welds tanks in a factory. Rosie the Riveter, they call her. She works double shifts and sleeps in her overalls. Your little brother collects scrap metal and used bacon grease, because apparently that helps make explosives. Your grandmother grows onions in the backyard and calls it victory gardening. You just call it barely enough food. Sevens, one fringe fact. Some soldiers had Dear John letters printed on pre-made forms, because so many relationships ended mid-war. Brutal efficiency. Heartbreak in Helvetica. The fear never stops. U-boats in the Atlantic. Kamikazes in the Pacific. Snipers in every building. Every time you hear a plane, you flinch. Every time you see a telegram boy, someone starts crying before he even speaks. You ration everything. Gas, soap, chocolate. You trade with neighbours. You sew patches over patches. You line your windows with tape so glass doesn't shatter into shrapnel. And then, finally, the war ends. The cheering feels distant. You've lost too much. Your father, your sister, your home. You walk through cities flattened into ash. The silence after 6 years of screaming is almost worse than the noise. But life crawls back. Babies are born. Schools reopen. Markets buzz again. You try to smile. You try to love. You try to believe in a future. But deep down, you know. The world can break. It broke once. It could break again. You're a kid in the 1950s or 60s. You live in a neighbourhood with white picket fences, black and white TVs, and nuclear fallout shelters in the backyard. The Cold War is here, and while it's not hot, it's still terrifying. You don't hear gunfire. You hear air raid sirens. You don't dodge bullets. You dodge drills under your school desk, as if wood and steel legs will save you from an atomic blast. The fear is constant, but subtle, like static in the background of your life. You hear your parents whisper about Cuba, Korea, Vietnam. You see mushroom clouds in comic books and wonder why superheroes never stop that. You don't know much about geopolitics, but you know one thing. Everyone's afraid, even the grown-ups. You watch TV newsreels showing men in suits pointing at maps. You're told the Soviets want to destroy your freedom. You're told communism is evil. And you believe it, because it's everywhere, in textbooks, church sermons, even breakfast cereal ads. Let's say you live in the USSR instead. The message flips, but the fear stays the same. You line up for bread. You whisper complaints. You salute portraits of leaders you've never seen. You live in a cramped apartment with 3 generations and a radio that only tells the correct news. One wrong sentence. Your uncle disappears. Everyone talks about the bomb. You hear the term mutually assured destruction before you even understand what mutually means. One push of a button and the whole planet evaporates. Historians still argue whether this balance of terror prevented war or just prolonged the nightmare. You go to school. You draw duck and cover diagrams. You practice crawling under desks, covering your head with a binder. One fringe fact. Children were shown cartoons where talking turtles explain how to survive a nuclear blast. It's cute. And chilling. If you're in America, you eat canned peaches and wonder if you'll be drafted for Vietnam. If you're black, your fear has layers. Police, poverty, racism. The civil rights movement is rising, and you're caught in the storm. You march. You sit in. You get hosed, beaten, arrested, just for asking to be treated like a human being. You're told you live in the greatest country on earth, and maybe you do, but greatness doesn't feel like segregation or constant threat of war. It feels like pressure, like expectation, like a dream you're required to chase but may never catch. Culture blooms in the cracks. Rock and roll, poetry, protests. Kids in ripped jeans say no to everything. You see your older brother burning his draft card. You don't know what it means yet, but you will. You watch the moon landing on a flickering screen. You hear your dad mutter about beating the Reds. You cheer, even though part of you wonders why we can put a man on the moon but not fix the streetlight in front of your house. At night, you stare out your window and imagine what would happen if the sirens go off for real. You know where the closest shelter is. You know what to grab. You've seen the instructional pamphlets. Remove radioactive dust before entering the house. As if that's just part of your evening routine. If you're a woman, your choices are boxed in tight. Be pretty. Be polite. Get married. Stay home. Advertisements show you vacuuming in pearls while your soul quietly suffocates. You dream of more. Some people call you crazy. Others call you brave. If you live behind the Iron Curtain, your life is carefully managed. The newspaper tells you how to think. The state tells you where to work. And if you complain too loudly, there's a knock on your door and silence. And yet, people fall in love. They play music. They dance in basements. They raise children and bake bread and laugh at jokes that could get them arrested. Life pushes on, even under the weight of potential extinction. You learn to live with the background buzz of annihilation. You stop reacting to headlines. You tape posters over the crack in the wall. You keep your radio tuned just right so the fear doesn't come through too loud. You grow up under a sky that might, at any moment, turn orange and then black. And you learn to call that peace. You were born yesterday, or maybe 5, 10, or 30 years ago, but it's the 21st century now. Modern, digital, advanced, and somehow still exhausting. It's supposed to be the best time to be alive, but you're anxious, broke, and stuck in a loop of notifications, climate alerts, and existential dread. You grow up surrounded by screens. You learn to swipe before you learn to write. Your babysitter is a glowing rectangle that plays algorithm-approved cartoons. Your school gives you a tablet but no updated textbooks. Your brain is full of trivia, memes, and a creeping sense that you're always behind. The internet is everything and nothing. It's your community, your therapist, your encyclopedia, and your greatest source of stress. You wake up and scroll. You eat and scroll. You lie in bed at 2 a.m. scrolling. You laugh, cry, rage, and then refresh. One fringe fact. The average person now spends over 7 hours a day on screens. 7 hours. Historians in the future might call this the era of doom scrolling. You live under climate change. Not the threat, the reality. Summers are hotter. Storms are stronger. Wildfires rage across continents. You learn new phrases like atmospheric river and wet bulb temperature before you've even memorised your own zip code. Historians still argue whether we acted too late, or simply didn't act at all. Your job prospects? Shaky. Rent is astronomical. Healthcare is a luxury in many places. A college degree comes with a price tag you'll never escape. You're expected to hustle, make content, build a brand, monetize your passion. Meanwhile, billionaires build rockets and buy social media sites for fun. The news is endless and never good. Wars, pandemics, disasters, scandals. You can't tell if things are getting worse or just more visible. Either way, it feels like hope is constantly trying to swim upstream through a waterfall of bad headlines. Dating is an app. Friendship is a group chat. Work is a Zoom call. You curate your personality like a product, smile for photos that don't feel like you, and quietly panic about how you'll ever afford a house, a child, or even a vacation. Still, you're told, you've got it easy. No one dies of plague anymore, they say. At least you're not digging trenches, they say. And they're not wrong. But also, you're drowning in a different kind of suffering, mental or emotional, invisible. It's burnout. It's anxiety. It's never feeling like you're enough. And inequality? Still thriving. Racism. Sexism. Classism. They've just learned how to wear better PR. People talk about justice in hashtags. Real change comes slow. You watch people fight for rights your grandparents thought were already won. Progress zigzags. Sometimes it backslides. Technology dazzles. AI, biotech, space tourism. But you still can't get a dentist appointment without 3 hold calls and a clipboard full of forms. The future came, just not for everyone. You try to care. You really do. About the planet. About people. But you're tired. And broke. And scared. So you pick your battles. Recycle what you can. Sign petitions. Cry quietly during nature documentaries. And yet, you laugh. You fall in love. You sing in the car. You dance in the kitchen. You hold someone's hand and, just for a moment, everything is okay. You binge watch shows. You share dumb memes. You find connection in weird corners of the internet with people who feel just as lost as you. Because even now, especially now, joy is resistance. Hope is rebellion. And every day you get out of bed, open your phone, and try to make sense of this messy, overwhelming world, you're doing something extraordinary. You're surviving, just like every generation before you. Let your shoulders drop now. You've just travelled across 10,000 years of human hardship. Disease, war, famine, fear, again and again. History tested what people could endure. And somehow, they did. Through ashes, through silence, through noise so loud it never stopped echoing. But here's the secret. It was never just pain. It was always people, laughing between raids, whispering songs into cold nights, carving names into wood just so someone would remember. People who loved, who hoped, who fought to make things a little better for someone else. You're part of that same story. Still being written. Still pushing forward. So, breathe. Feel the weight of all those centuries falling behind you like a coat you finally get to slip off. There's nothing you have to do right now. No alarms. No deadlines. No history to rewrite. Just you, safe, wrapped in the stillness of now. Let the past fade behind closed eyes. And when you wake, the world will still be turning, but a little softer, a little quieter, and maybe, just maybe, a little more kind. End of script. Sweet dreams.